Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're systematically unraveling one of the most dangerous and honestly viral medical phenomena in recent history. We're looking at a massive wave of digital misinformation that completely derailed basic human physiology. Specifically, we're breaking down the Tayyibat diet. This was created by an Egyptian doctor named Diaa Al-Awadi, and spoiler alert, the guy was speaking absolute nonsense. This wasn't just some harmless internet fad. It was a phenomenon that spread like wildfire across the Arab world through apps and social media, selling itself as the ultimate cure for chronic diseases. But as we're going to see, the reality was incredibly dark and completely delusional. I mean, think about this for a second. What if a doctor told you to eat 15 spoons of sugar a day and, oh, by the way, stop taking your life-saving insulin? It sounds completely absurd, right? You'd immediately think anyone prescribing this has to be out of their mind. Yet this exact advice was followed by thousands, with truly tragic consequences. People were actively told to throw away their real medications and just gorge on massive amounts of refined sugar and fat. Let's look at exactly how this whole medical disaster was built. Section 1. The Tayyibat Diet Myth. Flipping nutrition upside down. So Dr. Al-Awadi basically divided all food into this super rigid, dogmatic binary, the pure versus the toxic. And he literally flipped science on its head, classifying essential nutrients as toxic while pushing some incredibly dangerous excesses. Get this, he instructed his followers to consume up to 15 spoons of refined white sugar a day just for energy. And that's alongside literal mountains of white rice, potato chips, and heavy animal fats. But on the flip side, he outright banned poultry, eggs, liquid dairy, raw vegetables, legumes. He even banned drinking water unless you are experiencing a severe burning thirst. His reasoning? He claimed vegetables rot in your gut and water thickens your blood. It is absolute, unfiltered biological nonsense, with zero credible sources to back it up. By arbitrarily labeling perfectly healthy, natural foods as evil or toxic, Al-Awadi essentially engineered a pathological relationship with food among his followers. He induced a severe form of what's called orthorexia nervosa. Basically, his followers lived in this constant paranoid fear of eating perfectly normal things like fresh greens or an egg. This wasn't healing, it was deep psychological manipulation that isolated people from normal society and proper nutrition. Moving on to Section 2. A false medical authority. The illusion of expertise. Now, you might be asking yourself, how on earth could anyone believe a licensed doctor would say this stuff? Well, the truth is Dr. Al-Awadi was not an expert in his field, not even close. Sure, he graduated with honors and was an assistant professor, but his entire background, literally his whole career, was in anesthesiology, intensive care, and pain management. Look, high-level expertise in anesthesiology is great, but it does not grant you automatic authority in the incredibly complex fields of metabolic health, endocrinology, and clinical nutrition. He had absolutely zero formal academic specialization in the chronic diseases he was suddenly claiming he could cure. He basically abandoned his actual field to play this really dangerous game of make-believe in a totally different medical arena. He wasn't a real doctor in this space. And the way he bypassed scientific scrutiny altogether is wild. He didn't use clinical trials. Instead, he used cult-like psychological manipulation. He wrapped his whole bizarre diet in religious terminology, lifting terms from the Quran, so that if you criticized his diet, his followers felt like you were criticizing their faith. He also constantly pushed this huge delusion that big pharma and global institutions were hiding the truth. It was a classic cult tactic: demand absolute obedience and tell your followers to completely ignore real specialized doctors. Just listen to this. When other doctors actually challenged him, asking for his sources, asking for evidence, his response was to completely reject peer-reviewed science. He actually claimed that medicine is measured by patient results, not by scientific papers. He essentially said, hey, I don't need science. I just need people to believe me. That is a massive, incredibly dangerous red flag, and it really highlights just how delusional his whole practice had become. Which brings us to Section 3, the deadly biochemical reality, a recipe for physiological disaster. Okay, let's look at the actual science here, because honestly, your physiology does not care about viral social media trends. When you flood your body with 15 spoons of sugar and stripped fruit juices that have absolutely no fiber to slow down absorption, you trigger a very specific destructive mechanism called de novo lipogenesis. Basically, the liver is forced to take all that excess fructose and convert it straight into triglycerides, which is fat. This leads directly to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, severe insulin resistance, and massive systemic inflammation. So he was out there promising a cure for diabetes while literally force-feeding his patients the exact biochemical recipe that causes it. And his instructions showed a staggering lack of basic physiological understanding. I mean, he explicitly told patients to avoid drinking water, claiming it diluted the body. Think about that. In reality, if you're ignoring water until you feel a severe burning thirst, you are already deeply dehydrated. And what happens then? Blood viscosity skyrockets, meaning your blood gets incredibly thick, which drastically increases the risk of deep vein thrombosis, fatal blood clots, and acute kidney failure. But it gets worse. Al-Awadi went as far as telling diabetic patients, even type 1 diabetics who produce absolutely zero insulin, to stop their life-saving insulin injections immediately, all while feeding them pure sugar. Without insulin, glucose cannot enter your cells, so your body thinks it's starving and just starts breaking down fat at this catastrophic rate, flooding the blood with highly acidic ketones. By doing this, he was directly and inevitably pushing these patients into diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a fatal medical emergency. Let's look at Section 4, the tragic human cost. Lives lost to misinformation. You see, this wasn't just some harmless internet debate. These are the real, documented, and devastating human tolls of replacing evidence-based medicine with absolute delusions. We have the tragic case of a 13-year-old girl. Her mother stopped her insulin based entirely on this diet, which directly led to the young girl's death in intensive care. There's a young man from Manufia who died from severe blood acidity after stopping his medication, and a husband who tragically lost his wife in August 2025, just weeks after Al-Awadi convinced her to stop her actual medications and rely only on his bizarre food list. Consider this terrifying number for a second, 6.8. That was the fatal blood pH level found in a 7-year-old child whose parents stopped his insulin because of Al-Awadi's instructions. To put that in perspective, a normal blood pH is super tightly regulated around 7.4. A drop down to 6.8 means the blood has become incredibly, lethally acidic. This poor child was brought to the ICU in a severe coma, teetering on the absolute edge of death, directly because of this viral misinformation. Section 5. The final medical irony. The downfall of Al-Awadi. After years of desperate complaints from real doctors and devastated families, the Egyptian medical syndicate finally stepped in and conducted a massive investigation. In March 2026, they definitively concluded that he was committing severe professional misconduct, and they permanently revoked his medical license. He was officially legally stripped of his title as a doctor. And then, in a crazy turn of events, just a month later in April 2026, he was found dead in a hotel room in Dubai. Now, immediately after the news broke, his followers erupted, because long before his death, he had planted this paranoid seed, which, by the way, is a classic cult leader tactic. He told them, quote, "If you find me dead, know that I was killed." He set the stage perfectly so that if he ever did die, his followers would just blame some grand pharmaceutical conspiracy and completely ignore the actual science. But the forensic investigations in Dubai completely shattered that assassination myth. The official medical and forensic reports revealed there was zero criminal suspicion. None. The cause of death was entirely natural, yet highly preventable. A massive acute coronary thrombosis, essentially a very severe heart attack in the left coronary artery. And here is the ultimate tragic irony of this entire explainer. Dr. Al-Awadi died exactly the way real science predicts you will die if you follow his advice. I mean, he vehemently championed a diet loaded with refined sugars and saturated animal fats, and he even publicly claimed that chronic chain smoking was harmless compared to eating vegetable oils. His death was the direct, undeniable physiological consequence of the catastrophic lifestyle he forced onto his followers. Ultimately, biology always wins. So let's summarize what we should all take away from this explainer. First, always verify expertise. A brilliant anesthesiologist is not an endocrinologist. Second, extreme diets that ban healthy foods and push excessive sugar or fat, they're dangerous nonsense. Third, never ever stop your life-saving medications because of something you saw online. And finally, if medical advice is being sold to you using religious guilt, conspiracy theories, or emotional manipulation, run the other way. I want to leave you with this final thought. We live in an era where literally anyone can put on a white coat, build an app, and convince thousands of people to abandon science entirely. So ask yourself, in an age of viral medical illusions, how will you verify the real expertise behind the health advice you see on your screen? Keep learning, stay curious, and always, always demand the evidence. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and stay healthy out there.